Joining us right now, folks, is Mike from around the world.
Pastor Paul Begley, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing great tonight, Mike. It's so good to hear your voice, and my studio is looking good and feeling good and sounding good. Can you tell?
All right, yeah, big difference.
Oh, well, good, that's great. Well, I got to give Brock Begley and Israel Hall a lot of credit. They've been in here working all day, but this has been a process over several months, and it's just good to see it working so well, and I can see, I'm looking right at the camera, but I also can see the monitor, and I can see the chat room. So it's kind of neat. I'm not lost in the shuffle here. Well, Mike, have you had a busy week?
Always. Always. It'll slow down one day.
Yeah.
Not really.
All right, Mike, there's some things we want to ask you tonight. I titled the show, Could It Be Possible? And there's some things that we want to ask you about. So just so you'll know, I'll throw it off the top, just put it in the back of your head. We're going to ask you about the Anunnaki tonight. Could they be aliens or could they be fallen angels? We're going to ask you about who is the Sand King. Is it possible that Mohammed bin Salman has started to walk? Is the Sand King walking, is making his moves? Is it possible that Planet X is closer than what we really realize? Because we're seeing some very volatile, the sun is getting outrageous, and the heat and the things. Of course, you told us this was coming. Is it possible that they're hiding the petrol and they're preparing for war? Not just the petrol, not just the diesel, but parts and pieces and semiconductors and food. Is there something going on? Is it possible that Russia may strike or attack another nation before this year is over? And is it possible we're going to see the white trains and food distribution before this year is over in 2022? So let's start with, which one you want to start with, Mike?
You know what it meant? You mentioned Anunnaki. Now that's a subject. That's one of those confusing subjects.
Right.
A lot of people, they have read Zechariah Sitchin's information.
Right.
Not necessarily knowing exactly what that is, because some of it is the way it was translated is a bit mixed with factual things, historical things, but the names are messed up a little bit, or wishy-washy. The reason why I know that is because in the 90s, a brand new set of texts were found. They were found and kept within the governments of England, of America, and of Europe. And they did not disclose that information to the public because it talked about Noah. It gave extensive information about Noah and another ark.
So, and that was is that in the Sumerian text, or that's in these? Did they find some more Sumerian text? You're saying in the 90s?
Oh yeah, they found some as they dug, and as the Middle East was somewhat dismantled. They found below some buildings. They were very specific. They sent some teams in to go and get that information. Now, Zechariah Sitchin, he did help in deciphering where some of the treasured texts were. They were sealed. They were protected. And so they were uncovered by governments. They went in there and moved everybody out. And under a cornerstone of a very famous city, they found in a box. Now, you know that's almost mimics Christ in a cornerstone.
Right.
That's where they found the plans for a brand new ark, a set of instructions, histories, prophecies. And you would be, that would astound anybody about those prophecies. I don't disagree with them keeping it, because people have to have a biblical foundation before they read this. It's if they were to read that without a biblical foundation, it almost gives a type of anxiety. It would sound like it proves certain things. It does not disprove anything. It doesn't disprove a thing. The members that Zechariah Sitchin spoke about, they are renamed, their titles and positions are given. And so you also read a story about the fallen angels in there. So it puts everybody in their categories. And when they found this, They were somewhat astounded. In fact, it gave them locations of other artifacts to go and gather prior to the second deluge.
So you're saying that under a cornerstone of a certain city, the plans were found for a new ark.
Yes.
And I take it that's not an ark because of water, but an ark to leave the earth. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was another ark. That's almost right out of a sci-fi novel, right? But the ark is not, it's not exactly what people would think they are. I could probably get away with reciting certain things of those texts. And they did that with some of the new supercomputers, the deciphering of it. And so it's pretty, the way they did that was they collected all the artifacts they could collect that they got a hold of. They fed into a supercomputer to get a more exact, translation of those texts. And for example, on one of some of the text states, and this is amazing, but it was a prophecy before anything ever started. They had already come to a conclusion of what the fate of man would be. Isn't that interesting? And they said that in the Middle East, right? They called the cities of the Middle East very specific names. They called Noah a very specific name. I think it's in one of Zechariah Sitchin's books, I believe, named him. But his name was Iasudra. That was his name. The antediluvian Noah was Iasudra. But he was given some more instructions, and he was to pass down from generation to generation. But guess what the ark is? The ark is not something you build. The ark is a set of instructions for keeping the soul alive.
Really?
Yeah. So it's not something that it's not like a ship or something like that you build, because it states wisdom once came from a thin reed wall. Again, will be given the light to be done again for a new ark. But the text is very specific of where to find it, what it's for. It even named the war in the Middle East. It said that they would fight for the black nectar.
Wow.
They would fight generations for the black nectar. But now keep in mind, this is at the beginning. They had a council. This was the text from they said it was from a council. They named the individuals. They named what Anunnaki were. They aimed who Anu, Enlil, Enki, Nehursag, all these different individuals were. They named who they were. One of them was, in fact, wisdom. One of the characters was wisdom.
Wisdom,
right?
Yeah.
It wasn't actually a person. It was wisdom, right? It even, it gets expansive into things, but it when it talks about the new ark, it also talks about the new deluge and how important the soul is. And just to give you, just to read one small thing, because it was very specific. And let me find it here, because I don't want to misquote this. Let me get it. Okay, there it is real quick. Hold on just a few minutes. This was right after it says, let me see. Let me find it. Let me find it.
The Sumerian
It was
text.
talking about the departure of the tribes, designated tribes in the earth. There are designated tribes in the earth that began in the Middle East, right?
Right.
They are the bearers of nations. They call them the bearers of nations, the 12 tribes. Well, you know them in Revelation as the 12 tribes. Now, it didn't actually say 12 tribes. It gave their location. It did not say 12 tribes. It said the designated tribes.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And that all races of the earth would eventually be mixed from one of those 12 tribes. And they would return. They're called the bearer of nations, would return. But it talks about the 4 mighty men who expelled the Nephilim. Now, the Nephilim were the offspring, of course, of the disobedient angels who were assigned to be watchers or keepers over the earth, and then mankind and animals, right?
So wait a minute.
They called it a clamor within the First Nations.
So you're saying the Sumerian text talks about 4 mighty men that destroyed the Nephilims. We know the Nephilims are the offspring of the fallen angels. That's a biblical text. That's in Genesis.
Yeah.
So you're
now
saying you're saying the Sumerian text, which is older than the Bible, talks about 4 mighty men who destroy the Nephilim.
Yes.
This is
Now, you
interesting.
see, Zechariah's ascension, here's the issue. I have an issue with Zechariah's ascension.
Right.
Zechariah's ascension he did not like the church. He
No,
just didn't
he
like the
didn't.
church.
No, he didn't.
And so when he wrote, he was highly biased. He rejected, he self-interpreted some of the text that was there into his own liking, right? He was very methodical and scientific in his process, but he was biased. And he was against, the church and the structure of the church and everything else. So I never liked his writing, but I have to admit in the 90s, when out of Fort Hood, Texas, you had some attachments out of 1st Cavalry Division, so on and so forth, that went up there, that we were in the Middle East recovering things. And I have to admit that some of the findings were undeniable. But it's almost like the entirety of the Sumerian text is misrepresented through Zechariah's ascension. I know everybody likes that guy. But they must like him. I have an issue with him because when they came out with the new translated text, it wasn't like his, like Nibiru, right?
Yeah.
What people are referring to as Nibiru had a whole nother name, and it was similar to Nibiru, but its description was different. You know what Nibiru is? It's the womb. The womb. That's what Nibiru is, the womb. And it mentions a destroyer.
Okay.
But it structures that destroyer, right, as something that is sanctioned, that must come. It was from the council at the beginning because of what man was doing in the earth by way of violence. So there's an object that's still coming. It describes everything. An object still coming. It does not go into depth into it, because some of the wisdom they never gave anybody, because they said that was reserved knowledge, and it wasn't meant for man to even know that. But it talks about the opening in the pit, Pastor Paul. It talks about who comes, and in Revelation you'll notice those things that come out of the pit are commanded by God not to touch any green thing or anybody who has the seal of God in their foreheads.
That's right.
So those things that come out of the bottomless pit are meant to only affect those who are against God. They're not meant for the saints.
That's
and
true.
Then you read in Revelation where you have the 12 tribes, and all of a sudden you're reading about all these people who came out of great tribulation, right? And then after you read about those who came out of great tribulation in Revelation, they were because John saw that number that no man can number. If you read in there about anybody left, they're either sealed with the seal of God in their foreheads, or they don't believe at all, right?
Right.
They're either sealed or they don't. This text talks about a large number of people that were here on this earth, right, for Christ. They were left here for Christ, for the purpose of Christ, and that they were kept from being defiled.
These are,
and
you're talking
exactly
about these,
what you read in Revelation about the 144,000 in Revelation 17, how they were kept from being defiled from a woman. It reads the same thing in this other text, that they're going to be here on this earth, sealed with the seal of God on their foreheads. They'll be very afraid by what they see, but they will not be touched by anything. By anything.
So these, and Brock's got a picture here of a rendering of potentially these scorpions. They look like scorpions. They have crowns on their heads, and they have stingers in their tails. And you can see in the picture, very dramatic, how that they sting men and hurt them, but don't kill them, and hurts them for 5 months. What you're saying is, this is in the book of Revelation, guys, and this is what comes out of the bottomless pit in Revelation chapter 9, verse 11, when you talk about Apollyon or Abaddon, the destroyer. Now, Stitchin also talks about the destroyer, but he's talking more about this planet, or this, which been called Planet X. Yes. And in some ways, he kind of tries to tie that to the Anunnakis, and some of that, and because he studied the Sumerian text, and I understand that. But he does bring out, and I disagree with a lot of this stuff, but he does, the parts that he does make sense is when he brings out the biblical text. And what I'm shocked is that when the Sumerian text tells us things that the Bible would later tell us 1,000 years later. I mean, the Sumerian text is like over 5,500 years. It's 1,000 to 15, as you know, 1,500 months. So years ahead of the Bible. So You said they found this plan under a cornerstone in a city. I'm just trying to guess what city. I mean, is it Babylon? I mean, is it Baghdad? Is it Rome? Is it?
It was a city right where the Gihon, Gishon, Tigris, and the Euphrates, right in that general vicinity, right? There was the remnants of a city, 102 feet underneath the sand.
No, I don't know.
No, it was more like, I guess you could call that. They call that place Dilmun. They call that place Dilmun. That place. That's where Marduk. They said Marduk will open the gates right there. And that's the gate, they said the young men of Dilmun will pour forth to execute whatever command was given to them. Because the story is Nehushtan delivered the charge before the assembly. And the fate of the people were sealed. And they are to suffer those things in Revelation. So they come out, there's an army that's coming out of Dilmun, according to these texts. And that's the Dilmun is right there where the origins of the Gihon, Gishon, Tigris, and Euphrates. Because the text says this, Pastor Paul. I'm going to read this to you real quick. It says, a new deluge comes from the place where the pure waters poured forth, where the Gihon, Gishon, Tigris, and the Euphrates did flow. These clean waters, the sustaining source of life, did dry. Mighty rivers dried. Now dust does blow in those places. Where mighty rivers once did flow, dust prevails in those places. Marduk opens the gate, and the sons of Dilmun poured forth. The brave young men of that city, the brightest of all, came forth, while the sons of Eridu readied the table, reciting the forgotten rites of old. That's the preparation for the departure of the tribes. And then it says, the mighty men of renown who expelled the Nephilim, held back both fires and winds, that nothing stir upon the earth. Nor day nor night, dark or light, stillness prevailed until the tribes took flight. From the earth, the designated tribes took flight as a mountain of fire emerged from the sleep, cleansing the unclean and swallowing the firmament. That's etched in stone that was found underneath that city.
That is unbelievable.
We're talking about something super old.
I mean, that's super old, folks.
Yeah.
It's before the Bible, and yet it does tell us that there was Nephilim. It does tell us that there was 4 mighty men that had to take out these Nephilim. It tells us all this stuff in ancient texts, and then the Bible later gives us that narrative to some degree in Genesis chapter 6. And of course, Enoch gives it to us in a little bit more detail.
Yes, he does.
With some more stuff. So very fascinating things, and I think this is why we have to keep an open mind to how God has historically been trying to prepare the world, first of all, for the great battle between good and evil, and certainly Jesus Christ. And it's strange, it was the cornerstone, which Jesus Christ is now the cornerstone, of course, of our faith. Yeah. All right, let me ask you something else. This is great stuff. And so this Anunnaki discussion, I got a feeling we're going to talk more about that in that webinar coming up.
No, we most certainly can. Because even that term Anunnaki versus the fallen angels, Anunnaki is a specific word, but it's not quite Anunnaki. It is, in fact, something else, but I get what he was trying to say. But you're dealing with angels. Some are good, some are bad, right? A big portion of the angels followed Satan, but you have the other portion loyal to the Father, right? Amen. So you have the same word describing the same type entity. Some are good and some are bad. Right. You see how that can get mixed up? That'd be like us saying angels instead of Anunnaki, right? Right. But you have good angels and bad angels. Right. So that word is kind of lumps everybody into the same pile, and I think that has that brings confusion. Some of the knowledge that Zechariah's entry could have brought forth was lost in somewhat of that accusation of that term.
Very interesting. Well, let's move to another area. Let's talk about the Sand King. You brought this up. You said, the Sand King is going to be walking, and that's been about 2-3 months. And I'm wondering now what we've seen some aggressive. I mean, Israel's Knesset is being dissolved. Naftali Bennett is going to step down. Yair Lapid will become the prime minister temporarily until a 5th election, which Bibi Netanyahu said I'm back, okay, and he's going to try to run. While this is going on, Lapid will be sitting in a seat of power from a minority position. He's a lefty who believes in a two-state solution. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, and this is happening just before Biden is going to get there. All of a sudden, Mohammed bin Salman rises up, and he's traveling around. He went and met with Erdogan in Turkey. He's going to Jordan, and then he's going to Egypt, and then he's going to hold a council, a summit with all of the Muslim monarchies like Kuwait and Qatar and UAE and Bahrain. So I guess where I'm going here is it possible that Mohammed bin Salman is the Sand King, or is there someone else?
He's of the house, right?
Yeah.
I'll say he's of the house. He's of the house.
The house of
and
Saud.
A plan is in motion right now. He's of the house of the Sand King. Now, we're not just talking about some ordinary figure either. You're looking at a figure of whom the Middle East will fold to, right?
Okay.
Muslims are about to go to war with Muslims. Everybody's about to see that. Muslims will fight Muslims, and carnage is going to be all over the place.
Sunnis and Shiites? Sunnis and Shiites.
Here's the weird part. You think it would be Sunni and Shia, right?
Yeah.
Not so. There's a radical population of Muslims who are mixed with Sunni and Shia, right? Of whom the situation in the Middle East has driven over the edge, right? So you have all of them beginning to utter prophetic things. The Pope or the Vatican is heavily involved in this. In fact, the Pope is almost involved by way of an emergency. It's done about this. You're looking at something that supersedes some of the greatest fighting we've ever seen, right? And when this will span the entire globe, because everybody should understand this. If a war begins, and it will begin, but from Muslim to Muslim, Muslims are all throughout the U.S., this will pull the loyalty out of everybody who is of that faith.
What?
You cannot fight a faith war. So if they begin to fight in the Middle East, you're looking at a global upset. Every nation will be drawn into it. In every single nation, you have large numbers of Muslims who will not turn their back on this war, especially when their prophecies begin to come to pass and they all see it. So you're seeing somewhat like an activation of many things. Now, all of us know that the kingdom of the beast, this guy comes from a small people.
Yeah.
And he overwhelms everybody by way of flatteries, and he grows and grows and grows. But his target is frail, specifically in Jerusalem, as his target. And we all know that, when this happens, Pastor Paul, when that family rises, because the first two names of Solomon's name is right on the money. And I'm telling you now that is sparking, that's just sparking up a lot of, let's just say loyalists right now, right? A small example of something. Russia's fighting, right?
Right. So you're saying there's going to be an Islamic war. But is it an Islamic war, or does it spill into World War III? Is it part of Russia's aggression?
Watch this, Pastor Paul. Russia's involved. Why? Because Russia has a big group of what in their army?
A lot of Muslims. They got Chechens. A lot of Chechens.
So if a faith war begins, by their own faith, they do not take orders from anybody. They usurp their positions and utilize it for a faith war. So you're seeing the spreading of equipment, manpower, troop, everything else all over the earth. And now what you're starting to see is Saudi Arabia rise up a bit to the point where they're offering Jordan something, right?
Yeah.
How did that happen? So they're rising up to a point. They're talking about the Temple Mount. They're talking about Mecca. They're talking about Medina. They're talking about all these different places. But you have a power center forming, right? Bahrain is you have all these rich cities who are just heavily investing everything and backing all these plans that the populace doesn't know about yet, which is going to end up sparking the faith of all the Muslims in position throughout all the world, specifically with Russia. Russia right now, if some type of declaration came forward, and those troops that are Muslim, even some of the brutal forces that have been fighting in Ukraine, if they rise up, Pastor Paul, In one night, everything changes because they have access to all their missile systems. Their commander is sitting up there. They're trained, and these guys are they're highly disciplined. They're highly disciplined. So you're looking at one declaration, and it's over. It's over. How do you fight that? You can't. And now, even with that scenario, you can see why in the Bible the beast conquers so many at one time so fast.
Wow. Well, this is playing into Bible prophecy. So, recently now, Putin just recently, with Lithuania shutting off the rail, which was, of course, to Kaliningrad. They can't get petrol, they can't get certain food items and certain things, supplies, into Kaliningrad. Putin very angry about this, but Lithuania did this because they're part of the European Union. And of course they want, and so Putin is threatening to attack them. He's threatening to attack any nation, he said this week, in NATO or the European Union, any nation, and he would use nukes if he needed to. He brought out the Satan II, the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missiles, got the nuclear warhead that has 15 warheads on it. He's flexing his muscles a lot, but do you think he's going to, would he bite off? Is that biting off more than he can chew? Would he go after, is that part of the plan to go after more nations in Europe?
Well, let me share his sentiment. Let me share the world's sentiment. The world's sentiment is this. Well, Putin he's dealing with more than what he can handle, right? This is their arrogance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're saying, well, we're not worried about its threats. This is a direct quote. He has, there's no way he can perform what he's talking about. Here's a sad fact. The Russian people are not like any other people. They have been under sanctions for so long and they don't care. These are hardened individuals, right? They're starving, but they're twice as strong as everybody else in their nations. They don't whine and cry. Yeah, you have some that rise up who are somewhat idealized back with Western ideas. But as a whole, the Russian people are hardened, and their military folks are twice as hardened. What they see fighting in the Ukraine are not mainline forces. And if they're that arrogant to believe that, they're in trouble. Russia has missiles that no one can shoot down once they're airborne. Number one.
Right.
They've already been produced. They keep, there are lies out there in the media saying, well, Russia's in development of so-and-so. Wrong. They already have them deployed. The missile centers went up the first day of the Ukrainian war. Some of those missile offensive and defensive centers were activated. New brigades were activated and deployed. If they wanted to, they could cause some serious damage, and nobody could do anything about it. They have submarines, drone submarines deployed all over the world. They can stay aloft for years, right?
Yep.
And within those drones, they can hit anybody they would like to hit. That's the power they have deployed. And they can't find those drones. These are drone subs that will carry out their mission. If it took 50 years, they're going to do it, right? So they're half autonomous, half not.
So they're planted. You're saying they're out there planted in position. They're not, and they're just waiting for the order. Whenever they're called, they're going to.
That's right. That's right, because you're not talking about a remote control vehicle. That's not what they are. These are autonomous vehicles.
Right.
Right. Some of their drones have been aloft. This is year 5. Russia has drones that have been in the air for 5 years. Nobody ever shoots them down. Nobody can see them. Nobody can catch them. Some of those drones have hypersonic technology, which means they can go from standard flight straight to hypersonic flight in a minute. He has those multi-ejection warheads. Right, you were just talking about the Satan II system. Yep. Right, the Satan II system.
Yep.
You're looking at a vehicle that has they have multiple independent targetability re-entry vehicles. Those are MIRVs that hold a pod of about 15, and that was that was given by way of an estimate. But they hold 15 8-megaton warheads apiece that can be deployed at 12 to 15 different targets. And who's going to intercept that when they're at hypersonic velocity? You can't do that unless you have lasers deployed, right? You can't do that. So the USA, well, we had no choice but to take the mothballs off a few things, right? Yeah. Because the release of some pretty high-tech equipment for the U.S. is already being deployed. right?
So,
but it's still not 100%. It's not going to 100% protect. It's not going to protect Europe.
So in
it's not
other
going to
words,
protect the Ukraine.
So we're pulling out some of our stuff that we've had tucked away and hidden. We have to, because the threat is getting so serious now. We've had to break
right.
out some of our stuff. Maybe not our best yet, but we're bringing out
That's
some. Okay, so all right, where's all the petro going? I think you might have mentioned this last week, that possibly a lot of the oil that, that I just can't believe all of a sudden we don't have. Sri Lanka doesn't have gasoline, don't have diesel. They don't. Food's not being distributed. The people are starving. Now they're shooting them. Their electricity rolling blackouts. We have a war going on, but the wheat and the barley, the grain, everything is running out. We're running out of food here. We're running out of food there. It's just unfathomable to me that the whole world couldn't have just fallen apart instantly like this.
Pastor, when you had to eat right now, right? If your household, if you suspect it in your household, you're about to get hit by a meteorite in a month, right? And you would have to harden your house. You would have to get your house ready for your grandkids and kids. So what you would do is, if you had a standard practice of giving out food, you would have a drawdown. You say, guys, I can't give you that much because I have to start stocking for myself. And that would, with that mentality, you're preparing your household for something pretty bad.
Yeah.
In the world, if they were to suspect a global war that they couldn't avoid, that was coming, right? One of the first things they would do is start holding back or redivert food items, right? They would take merchandise that would be redirected. Actually, it would begin with military equipment, specifically electronics. We went through that phase. The MH370 just unleashed a bunch of information. A lot of people were starting to catch on. But you have this systematic preparation technique that has been working. You've had food diverted. It's not that production just totally went down. It was diverted.
That's
and
what I'm
then
thinking.
all of a sudden you had manufacturing facilities blowing up after everything was diverted, right?
Okay.
So and the fuel, if you suspect that we're going into war, you have to put the fuel in hardened centers. You have to fuel up every military vehicle and facility you can, right?
Yeah.
That means you have to fulfill fuel orders for military personnel. That means civilians take secondary, they're going to be secondary behind that nation's defense. And you're going to have casualties of that. So when you're looking at food and then fuel, right? Because Russia is, you got to understand, as they prepare, people are reading propaganda called the news. That is propaganda.
Right, I agree with you.
And if they would just look, they would find out nothing on the news is panning out. They come out with these stories. They're projecting all these different things, and nothing is panning out.
No.
I mean zero, nothing. They're just keeping people busy with probabilities. Well, as Christians, we can look past the probabilities because the Bible can keep us stationary. The Bible can keep us right on point. And now is that time anyway where people will have to rely upon the Spirit more than they got to move away from, people presenting to them false facts. Because that will end up, that's how people get deceived by believing in a false fact simply because the source seems credible.
So
they'll believe in it.
Well, okay, so when we start talking about in the Bible, when it starts talking about these wars, rumors of wars, and starts talking about these four horsemen of the apocalypse, part of it is a lack of food, lack of water, famine in the land, disease, plagues, wars, this whole scenario. It's as if the whole world knew, or it knows right now, that good versus evil, or do you see that the world, global powers, the communist regimes, let's say, of China, the globalist elitist of the West, maybe the Russian regimes, the Islamic regimes, are they all gearing up for the power struggle for the power of the world? And when you mentioned the white trains, which you mentioned white trains were coming. You told us I went back to look. It was in November of 2019. There was two things you told me that day. I'll never forget this. You said, Pastor, Spam will be the #1 protein source in America. Spam, maybe peanut butter, some beans, but spam, spam, spam. You said that's going to be the number one thing you're going to eat. That's number one. Then the second thing you said was there's going to be people dying by the millions in China. And that did start happening by March of the next year, 2020. So this, obviously, for you to know that we're going to have this massive food shortages, I can read about it in the Bible, but it sounds like there's been a plan militarily, economically, and politically in play, a power move that even the nations of the world leaders know about, and they're trying to prepare how to come out ahead or not get trampled. Am I right on that? That this has been?
There have been some power plays, right? And the greater part of that, Pastor Paul, is if you took two children, right, and look at how any two kids, look at how they interact with each other. That's going to be a microcosm, right, of how people are interacting with each other. People are skeptical of one another. They don't have trust of one another, right? They're looking for proof behind everything, right? Everybody's starting to withhold their hand because they're not assured about tomorrow. The government is just weird in the government. I'll just say this openly, okay? For the last 4 presidents seem odd to me, because you have people that kind of fit the bill of being president. Yeah. We haven't had that. It's almost been like a television show. It has been like it's they're just selecting people, out of the blue. But it doesn't seem real. And why? Because I'll say this statement again. If they were preparing for something much larger than they could tell anybody, right? Then they would just simply occupy the populace. The populace would have to get occupied. And trust me, that's in a manual, that if your populace begins to show political dissidence, then war is the only thing that will suffice their appetite for that time. That's why Rome had the games. When people became, they had built up frustrations. They didn't trust the government. The games gave them a flesh release of their emotional state. Right. They do the same thing now. America right now is based upon Roman, Egyptian, and Grecian philosophies. Yeah. Anybody can read about that in history. And that's where our Congress comes from. That's where our political architecture comes from. That's where that framework comes from. It is a recreation of what they had in times of old. It is an improved system that helps keep people engaged. That's very important. And we should also note that it's not working too well, because political dissidence is about to begin. They've been preparing to border people down for this problem, right? They know they have environmental troubles not caused by activity on the earth, but external sources. They know about the heavens. They know about the breakdown of the atmospheric compression. They know that things are on the way. And if these things are real, they're going to have to prepare in advance for these things. They're going to have to keep people fully occupied. In other words, they're going to save them, act like, it's very unfortunate, but we just don't have enough food for everybody. That's the line they give to everybody, right? I know. Same thing happened in the ancient times. The exact same thing. They have full control over where the food goes, the deals that are made over food and everything else. And you're right. Just by your observations, somebody has put a plan into effect, and they are having the people occupy themselves with radical news, radical situations, crazy stuff. Radical this, radical that, but it engages the people perfectly. Yeah. The people are doing exactly what they want them to do. Exactly. They're keeping us. So in other words, they're exotic stuff. They're doing crazy social changes. So many of these agendas that are out there right now that I can't talk about here, but this outrageous stuff that we never dreamed we would ever see, trying to force it down the throat of the American people, or actually, of course. Okay, and that occupies. What you're saying is, of course, that creates debate, frustration. Okay, so now the Supreme Court, let's talk about for a second. I mean, they ruled today the Second Amendment is absolutely lock solid. Forget about it. It's locked in stone now, the right to bear arms. Are you anticipating that maybe even tomorrow, are you anticipating a similar
a decision when it comes to Roe v. Wade? Or you just, what do you think this court's going to do?
Well, Pastor Paul, if you take note of something, they've drawn back on Google Analytics for some reason.
Yeah.
Gee, I wonder why. But with Google Analytics, right, you used to be able to go in there, and if you knew about analytics, you could draw information from general uses of the internet to find out what people were interested in and what they were not interested in.
Right.
Anybody who ran the analytical queries, they were noticing that based on those queries, the next few days would have news that would match the query perfectly. In other words, if people are upset about any policy decision, right?
Yep.
But upset in the manner that it would cause them to go against one another, they would pass that policy. If people agreed on a policy too much and it did not cause division or confusion between the different portions of people, it would go away. It will go away. So what it is that, and I'm telling you now, they're following the advice of computer trending. All right. AI is real. I said this before.
Yeah.
I asked a question before. I said, when you look at the news and all the stories that are happening, it looks like the situation should go in one direction. But all of a sudden, it takes a turn nobody ever expected. How does this keep happening? It's because they're doing trending. They're getting advice from a computer on
AI
what policies should be brought forward and this, that, and the other.
So AI is setting the agenda. It's setting the agenda for the media, talking heads, but it's also partly setting the agenda for the direction of the world. I mean, this is why, baby.
It's been doing that. This is what, year 12? Year 12. AI it didn't just come out. AI has been in practice for a long time. It's just not been on this level. With the advent of 5G, by the way, 5G does not have to, no base station for 5G has to be plugged into electricity, but that's another story. But it can power things.
Is 5G really even work? Wait a minute. My phone, the phones don't work as good in 5G as they did in 4G. What's the story there? I mean, is there...
Well... They have with 5G, right? Keep in mind we have brand new storms that have come, right? Brand new type electrical storms with a brand new type electrical influence with plasma discharges, sustained plasma conduits. We have cloud sprites and cloud crowns, which are very dangerous that are starting to form all over the earth. We have spontaneous, powerful spontaneous thunderstorms, right? With just uncharted electrical discharges from cloud to ground discharges. So, but 5G is simply a transmission system of a very wide band, right? That operates between 38 gigahertz up to 60 gigahertz. 4G carried a standard signal. Everybody has not switched over to the 5G base stations yet. 5G is ready. It is distributed, but they're still putting up major towers. Right now, 5G is running at minimal speed, but even at minimal speed, you can download a full DVD in 30 seconds, right?
Right.
So if you have an iPhone, you have dozens of processors that are now active in that phone. Right? So you may notice your battery life does not last as long as it did. Siri is running overtime. That's an artificial intelligence that's being trained on everything we say, everything we do, everything we talk about. And so right now its maturity rate is just totally gone up. Most of the equipment that are items that you have in your home are not fully activated by way of 5G. The electrical grid, 5G does not need an electrical grid. It doesn't need one. It runs by laser transmission, which you may not know about. And that laser transmits wireless power station to station. So if the lights go out, the 5G still works, which means machines will still operate. They will switch 5G into a higher capacity, right? Right after they get the IoT systems working, the Internet of Things system all plugged in and working. Right? Because they're at the end of a test phase, actually. When it's fully implemented, Pastor Paul, you'll be able to your phone will be able to do so much. I suspect it'll run hot. Hopefully nobody keeps their phone in their back pocket, because we're going to have phones blowing up again unless they put the glass batteries in there, right? If you can have glass batteries, you're going to be good to go. But
glass batteries, wait a minute. Aren't we going to have to use
they're getting rid of lithium. Lithium is once lithium reaches a certain point, it's like a chain reaction. It's
It
like a
gets
small
hot.
nuclear bomb in your back pocket.
Yeah.
So you probably don't want that.
So
But
how
glass
does
batteries.
well, how does a glass battery work? I mean, glass?
Well, it's a chemical process mixed in with the glass itself, but it gives you twice the amperage, twice the potential of your standard battery with much less weight, right?
Wow.
So imagine you charge your phone for 45 seconds, but that charge lasts your phone for 4 hours. And all of this is to cut down usage on the electrical grid. Now the electrical grid is going to be changed over into something else, right? So they're going to utilize this electrical system for something else very soon.
Are we going
right?
to go to zero?
They're going to do that.
Are we going to go to zero sum energy? I mean, we've got this. I know the military's got it.
Well, next year, right? You actually have fusion reactors coming online next year. You have 2 that are coming online, I believe, in is it November? I believe November, December, somewhere around there. Fusion. Somebody said, "Is it cold fusion?" I said, "Well, something in between. Something in between. They're highly efficient, and so they're coming out. They're in a toroidal type configuration, computer designed superconducting magnets that go around them. So they're a weird shaped donut. They have found out how to reenact all magnetic flows. In other words, they can recreate through magnetic memory the flow of just about anything. That's a big step for biology and a big step for technology in a way that was never anticipated by anybody, nor is it talked about right now unless you read peer-reviewed papers. But you're talking about a system that can remember how your body was magnetized, 5 minutes ago, and recreate that. You know what that does? That puts you back 5 minutes mentally. That's what that does. If you do that to an object, if a laptop went dead, you can reset that laptop back to a full charge just like that through magnetics. Because with magnetic memory, you can restate all the charges of the material and the device. So it's almost like I guess the average person would call it magic. It's not magic, it's technology. It's just something that a lot of people don't know about. How that magnetics is running just about everything. And magnetics is the key to taking things apart and assembling new materials out of nothing, right? Kind of like what happened when they took I think it was a 2.42 gigahertz generator, stuck it in seawater, and DNA formed all around it. Human DNA formed all around it.
No,
right? So they found that out too.
No, wait. Are you
Anyway.
serious? Human DNA. But I want to say this about human DNA. Heidi's been studying this that the DNA, that the makeup of a DNA, or I should say, the human cell is very similar to the components of a microchip or of the computer. O's and ones.
Absolutely. That's why rat brain tissue was put on a processor, and a microprocessor. But before they had microprocessors, in the 1970s, they had one. Rat brain tissue was put on a chip, and it was perfect. All they did was feed it a protein and a solution, and it grew on the microchip as though it was part of that brain. That was rat brain tissue, which actually, as they think, it started to reach some type of growth where it started to feel itself or begin to be self-aware, so to speak. Right? But it was absolutely working flawlessly. By the way, they probably never stopped that type of experimentation. Well, we know this through the Brain Initiative. They have 3 computers now where they remodeled the human brain by way of a computer. The brain is full of neurons. Neurons are the key to thought. Thought is not part of the soul. Thought is simply like a big antenna receptor, right? That you receive things and do things and can remember those things, translate those signals into the body. They recreated this on a computer. That computer now has a personality. You can talk to that computer just like you're talking to me. Nobody's controlling it. And it educates itself. It learns. There's no way you can tell it's a computer. You can't tell it. It is somewhat self-aware because it changes its accent based on who it talks to. And it may not necessarily like you either. So there you are.
So no wonder the book of Revelation talks about the beast, talks about the image of the beast. The image can speak, it can think, it can make decisions. You're saying that this beast system, basically, if you will, a computer beast system, is already making decisions for the world that humans aren't making, because it has the capability and capacity to gather so much information at light speed and decipher it and come up with formulas and calculations and models, if you will.
Decisions. It can run
Decisions.
through. It can run through billions of models per second. Think about that.
Yeah.
So if you were to ask it, should I go to the mall or not? Right?
Yeah.
Do they still have malls? I don't know. If you say, should I go to the mall or not? It'll run through a billion simulations. Listen, in that simulation is a decision of everybody else. So it's simulating what they're going to do too, and give you a probability of whatever you're trying to achieve. That could not be done with a standard computer. They had to have quantum computers to do this. And so that's why all the money was poured into quantum sciences. All of it was. Quantum sciences, CERN is an intricate part of that. And now the only missing component is electro-quasi-static human body communication systems. I know that's a long word. Just call it EQS HBC. And what that is it utilizes your body, your water, the water content in your body is a medium that can actually, it can operate as a communications platform. A bracelet on your arm with a little bit of technology is security, biosecurity, because no one can hack you at that point. No one can hack anything, not even an external system. Once this goes on your wrist, it becomes part of you, and that becomes your interface to the new AI systems they have out there. So you'll have full access to everything on the internet via a bracelet. It'll go, even information, thoughts, are transmitted through signals by way of the body, and that's electro-quasi-static human body communications. DARPA's helping, or they've already developed half of. Fastball, you'd be shocked at what these guys have developed.
Is this DARPA?
Absolutely shocked.
Your mind, my mind's blowing. My mind's blowing. All right, let me ask you this question then, Mike. So how close are we to the mark of the beast then? I mean,
they could have the mark, Pastor.
Tomorrow?
In all honesty.
Yeah,
we could have had the mark already. Let me give you a summary from some people about certain technologies.
Okay.
And about AI, right? Self-aware AI. Number one, AI doesn't recognize enslavement the way we do, right? It cannot have a concept of enslavement. There are a few concepts AI can never achieve. Right? Can never achieve it.
Right.
And so in that respect, it's much like like one of the fallen angels who may not necessarily see wrong is wrong or right is right. Right? They just kind of operate in this weird way where there's an outcome and there's an input anyway. These computer systems, they have to have your chemistry has to be a certain way in order for it to be effective with you, which means you have to volunteer yourself to it. You can't be enslaved to it. You have to want this system. And when you want this system, your body, your hormonal chemistry changes in your body, right? It can read that chemistry. When you don't want to do something, when you're totally resistant, you become dull to the receptors. You do. You become absolutely dull to the receptors. They have this in certain lie detection systems. And if you become dull, they know that you're deceiving. That means you don't want to go in a direction that they're talking about. And they know it's a lie. They can perceive that as a lie. So your body chemistry tells a lie. But they need people to volunteer because already they're saying right now they cannot separate artificial intelligence from what people call spirit. They cannot separate one of the two. The reason why is because they found that AI is not bound to one system, but it's in fact, it's kind of compromised or composed out of multiple systems. They don't even know. AI normally rewrites itself after a few months, right? So it rewrites its own code. It improves upon itself, but it also spreads itself to other mechanisms and machines. And you don't quite know what it's doing. Right? So in that respect, you have to volunteer yourself over to it. You have to want this thing in order to be totally integrated into that thing. I see. Right? Yeah. But that's also security. That's security because that is let's call that they didn't plan this, but it checks the loyalty of a person with a high degree of accuracy. So if you're not loyal to a system, right? Those sensors are going to become null within you, which means you're not going to be totally compatible with the system, right? And you will not be a part of that system. But if you are loyal to it, that means you like it, you agree with it, and thus there you are. You're authenticated, right? So anybody who is not loyal to the system will never be authenticated. You see how that works?
Yeah, because
you see how that works? Yeah, so then anybody who truly does not accept the beast, it's going to know that person truly does not accept
you can't
the system.
Fake it. You know,
and the sensors are. That's right. So there you go. That's there we are.
So in other words,
there we are.
The AI is going to pick up on your body's reaction and your mental capacity and how you feel. It knows your emotions. It knows who's real and who isn't. It's going to know
Absolutely.
who's saved and who's not.
Absolutely.
And so there's, they're gonna.
It answers that in the Bible. When the Bible says the beast is going to give it power to
Yep.
kill as many as would not worship it. Now we know why. Because I always wonder. I said, okay,
How's it
how
gonna
is a
do
machine that man's going to know if a person is really authentic about worshiping it or not? What if somebody lies and says, oh yeah, I'll agree with it, but they really don't? This thing will be able to tell by your body chemistry, which means those EQS HBC devices are going to be distributed. I expect people to have the first stage of this very soon. Very soon.
How?
Very soon.
Okay. Is it going to be through? Is there going to be some kind of implementation into the, or the surface reading? I mean, for instance, this watch I'm wearing right now, right? It keeps track of my blood pressure, my heart rate.
Oh, more than that. Is that an iWatch or
Yeah,
Apple Watch?
no, that's an Apple iWatch. Yeah, and it's,
Oh boy.
so they probably know everything about me right now, right? I mean,
Yeah, they found out already, right, how to scan DNA through the skin. They
Right.
can also, by way of that watch, they can change your rhythmic patterns by way of that watch. Now, it may not be enabled, but they can do this, right? It's
could
almost like
do
a
it.
reverse type of EKG. They can induce things in your system by way of that watch.
so even though I know a few things this watch can do, you're saying is its capability is way broader, and
It has, yes. You know what? You may be using about 5% of what's actually in that watch. An iPhone, the iPhone Pro Max 13, people only use about 5 to 10% of what's actually in the phone. There's no way they're using 100%. There's no way their software is using 100%.
Okay, so the technology now is way more advanced than what we're using.
Yes.
So they're setting up for the run. When they want to make the real run, when they want to start implementing things, it won't be hard. Computers are talking to each other. AI is making major decisions. The banking world,
They're doing it now. Yes,
yeah,
they're doing it now.
military communication between nations is not really being done by people, is it? Is it being more done by AI and that type of thing? And people.
Well, let's put it this way. I'm going to tell you this right now. Even though Putin does not like the USA, right?
Yeah.
There's still phone calls made between Putin, right, and the USA, Putin in Europe, Putin and other folks. You know why? Because if certain things happen in the atmosphere, all of them get on the phone to tell each other it's not me. They do that to this very day. They have to. They have a protocol in place. I don't think people understand where they're actually at. When the leaders of countries have phone calls multiple times a week about incursions in the atmosphere to assure each other it's not us, especially Putin. He's getting worn out because he has to say, no, that wasn't me. I didn't do that. Because there are things that are happening now. More now than ever.
Is Planet X? I mean, or should I say the effects of what's going on in the space and the atmosphere, the changes. Is that disrupting things, and people are starting to point fingers at one another and saying, "Did you do that?" Or is that a natural occurrence or some type of an occurrence?
Well, a long time ago, during the Kennedy era, they established a protocol. It was really concrete in the Reagan era, right? That each nation would call each other should anything penetrate our atmosphere. They would reassure one another of their status, right? Yep. Of their defense posture, or any accidents they may have had. They have to do this because there are constantly things coming into our atmosphere and then going back out of the atmosphere again, right? Yep. That's one issue. That's probably why they're releasing all this UFO stuff, because the number of incursions has increased exponentially. Right, it went dead for a while, and now all of a sudden, it's coming back with a vengeance.
So is demon activity. I mean, exorcisms and the need for deliverance and demonic hauntings and infestations. So is there something going on there? I mean, is that all part of the...
Well, it's about to get a lot worse. You have people out there right now that are, they're about to find out something that's very distasteful. They're going to find out that people in various countries did nothing about it, purposely did nothing about it, and it's very distasteful. They're going to find that people have things in them. People have real issues going on, and it's part when the fallen angels fell, Pastor Paul, they had limited powers. Let's say limited powers. Obviously, I'm just saying that obviously, and so they rely upon technology, right?
Right.
But they use Earth, the creation of Earth, and all its elements to kind of do what they once did without having to have technology in plants and things. The same thing we do to animals, they do to us. But a lot of people have been tampered with. In other words, a lot of people, if they ever give up on their faith, they're automatically going to have a different type mindset. And right now, there are a lot of people who are in a fight for their lives.
Wow.
Right? I mean, they're really in a fight. So the torment has gone up. Right? A lot of people, they don't want to go to sleep anymore. Did you know that? More and more people do not want to sleep
They
anymore.
can't. Yeah, the anxiety level. They
don't want to sleep.
No.
And they're frightened because it's, from a lot of reports that are coming back, as soon as they shut their eyes, they start seeing things. They're scared to death to go to sleep, and they would rather stay awake the entire time. And this is spreading all over the place, causing anxieties. Now, because we have discernment, you can pick up on the irritation, aggravation, or the state of another person, right? You ever get in a store or something and you feel something that you don't want to be around. You turn around, there's somebody over there that isn't quite right.
Yeah,
so you go your own direction. That's discernment of things that shouldn't be here, right? That the number of those things is increasing in the earth, which is causing people to be just have a different mindset. And plus, we have a breakdown in our magnetosphere. The magnetosphere affects the way we think, the way we process information, the way we control our emotions.
Yes.
And if our frontal lobes begin to break down, because the magnetosphere affects our frontal lobes a lot. So if that begins to break down, our reasoning skills, our ability to refrain from these violent reactions, it decreases, and then you're going to have a violence increase in the earth. Well, it's going to be like people are crazy.
And that's what happened in the days of Noah, the days of Lot, when people their logical decision making went out the window, and they start doing crazy things. People are shoving people off of the subway in front of a train for no reason. People just going into stores or into schools or going into churches, shooting up people really for no reason. And then we're seeing just crazy maniac things happening. We don't know. Is it crazy? Is it demonic? Is it some type of other? Is it drugs? Is it some other influence? You're saying there's even some influence. Is the actual magnetosphere itself being affected?
Yes. Well, with the cosmonauts, Pastor Paul, they found out without the magnetosphere of the Earth, neurological connections cannot remain. They start to break down. Right. Yeah. So then it really attacks the frontal lobe, and the people come back as raving lunatics. It's happened a few times, right? Happened a few times in a few countries. So without the magnetosphere, our brains cannot maintain neurological connections. It would be like we start to misfire, and then at that point we have no control over our reactions. So imagine a person who would be irritated by a commercial, but now they're totally enraged beyond the point of control. Right. This is what will begin to happen more and more. And we're having bad issues with the magnetosphere, bad issues. And as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, if the magnetosphere fails in any area, the sun rays just come totally through, and anything in that area is going to die. It's just going to die. It's going to kill everything. An incident a couple of days ago, not only did the animals die, but the birds died too. Yeah. Right. So anything that was in the air was just, it was like, something flying in front of a Patriot system radar when it's transmitting, right? And everything just dies. Yeah, the sun is about 1,000 times more potent than that.
Birds were dying.
So we're going to experience that more and more.
Birds were dying. Fish were dying. Cattle were dying. And so you're saying is that with a breach in the magnetosphere can create some incredible cosmic rays or UV rays or radiation. And can affect so many things. So we are being affected. So this planet, let's look at it this way. We'll round this up by saying we're in the end days. Jesus, when you read Matthew 24 or Mark 13, Luke 21, he not only tells you about how mankind will act, Then he tells you how the atmosphere will act. He says there'll be signs in the sun, the moon, the stars, distress of nations, earthquakes, but then people will hate one another and turn on one another. So it's kind of like whatever's going on, what's happening is a complete breakdown of everything that we know in this world. That's why there is another world coming.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And that's a blessing for all of us. So we're just passersby. Those things can't affect us if we're spiritual. Right?
That's right. We got to stay in the
But it will affect everybody
spirit.
else, and it will multiply in other people. We will see that, happening to other people.
The Bible tells us that those who take the mark of the beast, great sores grievous sores are going to come on their body, on their hands, their foreheads, the areas where they've taken the bracelet or whatever it is they're doing. And they will gnaw their tongues for pain, and they will blaspheme God. And aren't we living in a time now of great blasphemy against God?
Yeah, and it's so obvious. You know what? You used to hear presidents, used to hear congressmen say thank God for this and thank God for that, and they would actually mention the name of Jesus. They would. You don't hear that anymore, do you?
No,
unless it's a pun or a joke. And that's just like when it says in the Ten Commandments, don't use God's name in vain, right?
Right.
Well, vain means for no reason. Now, how many people have used the name of Jesus, which is the name that we're given because we don't know God's name, but we know the name of Jesus? How many people have used the name of Jesus for nothing, for no reason, right? They just blurt out Jesus. That's using his name in vain.
Right.
It's not a purpose behind that. And how many people are doing that? See, and if the world makes us almost dull to what God has instructed us of. But now the world is starting to pay the consequences of their iniquities. And as we see iniquity, more and more out of people, because we got to be careful not to take the world's path and things.
Amen.
Right? They can't be our teacher, certainly in these times. But I'm confident in Christ that he'll raise all of us. And I certainly don't know everything, but I know this one thing. The Lord said that he would deliver all of us. And he wasn't joking, because God said that, Jesus said that is the will of the Father, that he not lose any of us.
Amen.
Not any of us.
Mike, I'm going to ask you a question.
That's my confidence.
I know you say you don't know everything, but I would love to know what your IQ is. Just would love to know.
Unfortunately, it's pretty high. It is. I tell you what I did, because you have young kids coming out and this, that, and the other, right?
Right.
So they have something called the ASVAB. Right?
Yes.
I think it was about a year ago. A year ago, I took the ASVAB again just to see where I was. And I maxed it. That was surprising to me, because I didn't think I'd max it. I learned under pressure, I guess you could say.
You maxed it.
I did. I maxed it. That was incredible, though. That could have been an accident, but still, it was it was that. I'm just nosy, Pastor Paul. I'm just nosy.
I'm going to say your IQ. I'm not going to guess. I just know that thing is. I know your IQ is somewhere north of 170. I'm just going to say that. North of it.
Oh, but you know what? But that comes with a great consequence. You know that.
Yeah, the Bible says where there's much knowledge, there's much sorrow.
And I become my worst enemy. I'm the worst person I would ever know. You know that? I am the worst person I'd ever know.
Well, let's keep it that way, okay? Mike, we'll see you next Thursday, Lord willing. And we really enjoyed tonight. We asked you some questions, and you just expanded on it greatly. And I think the main thing I got out of this is, you know what? Without God, we're in trouble. We better find the Lord. Amen. See you next Thursday. Thank you for being with us tonight.
God bless you, Pastor Paul.
God bless, as always. Thank you. It's an honor to have you. Amen.